Alright, so it is finally time to take apart this K91 transaxle out of that 425 from a couple months ago. It's been sitting on the floor, and finally I had the space and time to get it up on the bench, and now we can take it apart over the next couple of episodes of this. So, I figured I'd start off by kind of explaining all the external components, and then I'll explain how we're going to take it apart and why we're going to take it apart over leaving it whole. Mostly just to explore how it works. All right. So, axle, we clearly know this is the axle, the rear axle. This is the dampener for the input. Now, what's going to happen is, I already had the dampener off, and I didn't like the previous video I made. So what's going to happen is this dampener is going to control the movement of this input arm, and basically this input arm is what allows the swash plate inside to direct the flow of hydraulic fluid. That's the way I think of it. You see this right here will limit the travel of the dampener, or limit the travel of the input arm. And so that is the main input for forward and reverse. It'll go one way for forward, other way for reverse. All right. Around here on the front, we have the charge pump, which is right here. The input shaft comes in. Behind this input shaft, there's a little gear, which when we take the charge pump off, we'll explore that gear, and you'll see that is actually what makes all the flow for this transaxle. This is the motor pump or motor drive assembly right here. This is what drives basically the wheels. So fluid will come out of the charge pump into this main case. It will then come down, and there's the swash plates I was talking about in there, and that will direct this shaft right here to drive the wheels, and we'll explore all that. There's basically a shaft that runs all the way through the transaxle. You got the filter on the bottom. This is your mid PTO, which goes all the way through the case. This right here is your brake. If you look right there, you can see where it's really dirty. You'll see anytime you mash on that, you mash the brake. This is your Diff Lock. Basically, your Diff Lock, to engage it, basically pulls in. You see that there's a limited amount of movement here. That is your Diff Lock. Your parking brake basically is just lift up, and it locks in on your brake, on the pedal. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and pull the axles off. I already have the bolts out, and by doing that, then hopefully we can kind of explore a little bit of the differential, things like that. I'll go ahead and take some of the small external parts off, and what we're eventually going to do is, what I hope to show is kind of talk about why, I guess my ultimate reason for doing this is when we start talking about hydraulic fluids and everything, and we also talk about how much of a load the engine should go under when you engage PTO on these wet drive systems and the wet clutch systems. Kind of explore some of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull out the clutch pack, which is all the clutch discs together. We're going to pull out the clutch pack, and we're going to kind of talk about what would make a clutch chatter. So if you've ever engaged your 445 with a 60-inch deck at an idle, you'll know that you will hear this awful racket, and what that is that's those clutch plates chattering. And depending on the fluid that you have in the transaxle, that clutch chatter can get worse or better. And so we'll explore some of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull these axles off of here, and we'll look at the axles. We'll look through the differential and everything, kind of explore that. I am going to set up the camera to see if I can get this on film, but make no promises it'll actually make it to the final video, depending on how shaky it is. So we will go from there. So that is the external review of a K91, and over the next little bit we will kind of pick it apart. Not something, if you're going to use this video to rebuild it, obviously I'm not rebuilding this, and so I wouldn't necessarily want to get into one of these things to rebuild it, because you could probably buy a used unit a little bit cheaper than you could rebuild one. So don't think of this as a tutorial on how to take it apart and put it back together. We're just going to take it apart and be done with it. All right? Alright, let's see if I can get these axles off of here without making too terrible of a mess. Now the big thing with taking these axles off is obviously you see that I have this sitting in a pan because more than likely there are still lots of fluid still in the case. So we're going to see if I can't just pull them off. I think I'm going to start with a... And I've already got, like I said, I've already got the bolts out. And so rubber mallet generally comes in really handy for stuff like this. You're not doing any long-term damage by using a rubber mallet. Alright, so we should be able just to pick this up slightly and slide it out. And there is the right side axle. Alright? Pretty easy process once you get the bolts out. Now getting the bolts out was a little bit of a challenge. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull the other one out. And that is left side axle. Now you see how much longer the left side axle is than the right side axle. I'm just sitting here looking how much wear they have on them. So pretty easy process there, is taking the axles out. Alright, let's explore the internal of the differential and the PTO shaft. So that shaft right there in the front, right here, that is the mid-mount PTO shaft. You can actually see it follow all the way through. What it's doing is it is coming from in the back, where we'll eventually take the back case off, and you'll be able to see the gear set. In fact, I might take that back case off or that back cover off next, just to see that gear set. Now, when you look down through the tunnel there, that is the differential. In the middle, the differential gear, you see that there is one set of splined gears on this side. And we go over to the other side, the other set of splined gears is right there. That's where the two axle shafts sit. Now, pay attention to what that is, and we'll walk over and we'll look at a K92 and we'll explore how those two are different. I'll just turn the camera off and then we'll go over there. Alright, so this is the K92, and you see that there is a rod in the middle. And the biggest thing that that rod does is it basically protects the axle shafts and also adds some strength to the differential. The K91s had a weaker differential than the K92s. That is one of the improvements in between the K91 and K92. So that is one thing that is a bit different between the two transaxles, and if we... I don't know if I can roll this over on the side one-handed. We can certainly try. And you see, it looks very similar on this side with the same PTO shaft, etc. So that is the K92 right there, and that's just so you can see the differences between the two.